At 14:23 on the afternoon of March 18th, 1945, Private First Class James Hendricks sat alone in a foxhole 17 meters behind the American front line near Remagen, Germany. The Ludendorff Bridge had been captured 11 days earlier. The Rhine crossing was secure. But the Germans were launching counterattacks every 6 hours. Hendricks was 22 years old. He carried an SCR-300 radio on his back. The unit weighed 35 pounds. His rifle was a standard-issue M1 Garand. He had fired it twice since landing in France 4 months earlier. Both shots missed. The infantry company he supported had been laughing about it for weeks. They called him the mailman, because all he did was relay messages. At 14:24, he heard boots on frozen ground. He looked up from his foxhole and saw German infantry moving through the tree line 200 meters to his east. They were not running. They were walking in staggered formation, weapons low, moving toward the collapsed section of the perimeter where 3rd Platoon had been overrun that morning. Hendricks reached for his radio handset. His hands were shaking. He had never called fire missions before. James Hendricks was born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa in 1923. His father worked at a grain elevator. His mother died when he was 9. He graduated high school in 1941 with average marks in everything except mathematics. He could calculate freight loads, interest rates, and fuel consumption faster than most men could write the problems down. The Army noticed this during his initial processing at Fort Dodge. They assigned him to communications training at Camp Crowder, Missouri. He learned radio operation, signal codes, and forward observer procedures in 8 weeks. He did not learn how to fight. When he arrived at his unit in February 1945, the company had already been in combat for 9 months. They had crossed the Siegfried Line. They had lost 63 men. The veterans treated him the way all veterans treat replacements. They did not learn his name. They did not include him in planning. When he asked questions, they told him to stay quiet and carry the radio. The SCR-300 was the standard backpack radio for infantry units. It transmitted voice on frequency modulation between 27 and 40 megahertz. Maximum effective range was 3 miles under ideal conditions. In forested or hilly terrain, that range dropped to 1 mile. The radio required a 6-foot antenna. In combat, that antenna made the operator visible. Hendricks carried it anyway because those were his orders. The company commander was Captain Eugene Dorfman, 31 years old, from Pittsburgh. He had been wounded twice. He did not trust radio operators who could not shoot. The forward observer assigned to the company was 2nd Lieutenant Robert Kemp. Kemp had been killed 4 days earlier by a mortar fragment while calling artillery on a German machine gun nest. The company had been without a trained observer since then. They relied on written requests sent back to battalion by runner. Response time averaged 40 minutes. By March 18th, the Germans had learned this. They timed their attacks to exploit the gap. On the morning of March 18th, the German 11th Panzer Division launched a localized counterattack against the Remagen bridgehead. The attack was not designed to retake the bridge. It was designed to disrupt American resupply operations and inflict casualties. Intelligence reports indicated the assault force consisted of approximately 200 infantry, supported by 3 Stu-G3 assault guns. The attack began at 6 o'clock with a preparatory barrage from mortars and Nebelwerfers. American positions along the eastern perimeter took sustained fire for 11 minutes. 3rd Platoon, positioned on the northern edge of the company sector, reported movement at 6:14. German infantry emerged from the woods in squad strength. They used the terrain well. They advanced under cover of smoke and moved through a drainage ditch that provided concealment from direct fire. 3rd Platoon engaged at 70 meters. They killed 6 Germans in the first exchange. The rest continued advancing. By 6:30, 3rd Platoon had been pushed back 200 meters. They left 9 men behind. 4 were dead, 5 were wounded, and could not be moved. Captain Dorfman committed his reserve squad to stabilize the line. It worked temporarily. By noon, the German pressure had stopped. Dorfman assumed they were regrouping. At 14:24, Hendricks counted 38 men moving through the trees. They wore Feldgrau uniforms and carried Kar 98K rifles. 2 men carried MG-42 machine guns. He could see their breath in the cold air. The temperature was 4 degrees Celsius. There had been rain the night before. The ground was soft. Their boots made noise. Hendricks ducked lower into his foxhole. He pressed the handset against his ear and keyed the transmit button. He spoke quietly. He identified himself using his call sign. He requested fire support from the Battalion Fire Direction Center. The voice on the other end asked him to repeat. Hendricks repeated. The voice asked if he was a trained observer. Hendricks said no. The voice told him to wait. Hendricks said there was no time. The Germans were moving toward the gap in the line. If they reached it, they would be behind the company. The voice asked him how many targets. Hendricks said 38 infantry in the open. The voice went silent for 4 seconds. Then it came back. It told Hendricks to send coordinates. Hendricks did not have a map. He had a compass and a basic understanding of the terrain. He estimated the distance to the German formation at 200 meters. He estimated the direction as 80 degrees from his position. He relayed this information. The voice told him that was not enough. Fire missions required 6-digit grid coordinates, target description, and method of engagement. Hendricks did not know how to provide those things. He told the voice he could see the targets. He could adjust fire once it landed. The voice asked if he understood the risk. Friendly positions were close. If the fire mission landed short, it would hit American troops. Hendricks said he understood. The voice told him to stand by. Hendricks looked up from his foxhole. The Germans were 150 meters away now. They had spread out into a skirmish line. 2 men were setting up a machine gun on the edge of the clearing. Hendricks could see the ammunition belt. He keyed the handset again. He said they needed to fire now. At 14:26, the Fire Direction Center relayed Hendricks's request to Battery A, 7th Field Artillery Battalion. The battery was positioned 3 kilometers southwest of the front line. It operated 4 M101105 mm howitzers. The battery commander was Captain William Stokes. He had received fire missions from untrained observers before. Most of them ended badly. He asked the Fire Direction Center to confirm the coordinates. The Fire Direction Center confirmed. Stokes ordered his guns to load high explosive shells with a proximity fuse setting of 200 meters. He set the charge to produce a range of 3,000 meters. At 14:27, he gave the order to fire 1 gun for adjustment. The howitzer fired. The shell left the barrel at 475 meters per second. Time of flight was 12 seconds. Hendricks heard the whistle. It started faint and grew louder. The Germans heard it too. Some of them stopped walking. One man pointed toward the sky. The shell landed 30 meters behind the German formation. It detonated in the air. The explosion was sharp and loud. Shrapnel tore through tree branches and fell onto the frozen ground. No one was hit. The Germans scattered. Some ran toward the trees. Others dropped prone. Hendricks keyed the handset. He said, "Add 50 meters." The voice repeated the correction. Hendricks said, "Fire for effect." At 14:28, all 4 guns fired simultaneously. 16 seconds later, 4 shells arrived over the target area. They detonated in sequence, each explosion 2 seconds apart. The first shell landed in the center of the German formation. 3 men were killed instantly. The second shell landed 10 meters to the east. It caught the machine gun team as they tried to move the weapon. Both men went down. The gun fell onto its side. The third shell landed near the tree line. It detonated above a group of soldiers attempting to take cover. 5 men were hit. 2 died immediately. 3 were wounded and began crawling toward deeper cover. The 4th shell overshot by 20 meters. It exploded in the trees without causing casualties. Hendricks watched the smoke rise. He could hear screaming. He keyed the handset and said, "Repeat." At 14:29, 4 more shells fired. This volley landed tighter. The Fire Direction Center had corrected based on the first impact pattern. All 4 shells detonated within a 30-meter radius. The Germans who had survived the first volley were now trapped in the open. Some tried to run back toward the woods they had come from. Others stayed prone and covered their heads. The shells did not distinguish between movement and stillness. 12 more men were hit. Hendricks counted bodies on the ground. He counted movement. He estimated 20 Germans were still alive. He said, "Repeat again." The voice asked if he had visual confirmation of effect. Hendricks said yes. The voice said battery was firing for effect, continuous fire, 4 rounds per gun. At 14:30, the artillery began a sustained barrage. Shells arrived every 8 seconds. The German formation ceased to exist as a cohesive unit. Men ran in different directions. Some made it to the tree line. Most did not. Hendricks stopped counting after the sixth volley. The area where the Germans had been walking was now cratered and smoking. Trees were shattered. The ground was torn apart. The noise was constant. Hendricks could feel the concussions in his chest even from 17 meters behind the line. At 14:33, the firing stopped. The voice on the radio asked for battle damage assessment. Hendricks waited. Smoke drifted across the field. He could not see clearly. He waited another 30 seconds. The smoke thinned. He saw bodies. He saw pieces of equipment. He saw no movement. Hendricks keyed the handset. He said all targets destroyed. The voice asked him to confirm count. Hendricks said he counted 38 enemy infantry at initial contact. He said he saw no survivors. The voice told him to remain in position and mark the target area for ground assessment. Hendricks said, understood. He set down the handset. His hands were still shaking. He looked at his rifle. He had not fired it. He looked at the radio on his back. It was still transmitting. The battery light was yellow. He turned it off to conserve power. At 15:10, a patrol from 2nd Platoon moved forward to assess the impact area. They counted 34 bodies. 4 men were found wounded in the trees 70 meters east of the main impact zone. They were taken prisoner. The patrol leader, Staff Sergeant Dennis Holcomb, returned to the company command post and reported to Captain Dorfman. He said the artillery had destroyed the entire German assault element. He said there was no sign of additional enemy forces. Dorfman asked who had called the fire mission. Holcomb said it was the radio operator in the foxhole behind 3rd Platoon's position. Dorfman asked if he meant Hendricks. Holcomb said yes. Dorfman walked to Hendricks' position at 15:40. Hendricks was still in the foxhole. He had not moved. Dorfman looked down at him and asked if he had called the artillery. Hendricks said yes. Dorfman asked if anyone had taught him how to do that. Hendricks said no. Dorfman asked how he knew the coordinates. Hendricks said he estimated. Dorfman asked how close the first round landed. Hendricks said 30 meters long. Dorfman nodded. He told Hendricks that 30 meters was close enough to get everyone killed. He told him the adjustment was correct. He told him the follow-up fire was effective. He told him he had saved the line. Then he walked away. The company remained in position for another 6 days. Hendricks continued to operate the radio. On March 22nd, he called another fire mission during a German probe near the southern edge of the sector. That mission destroyed 2 German reconnaissance vehicles and scattered an infantry squad. On March 24th, he was reassigned to battalion headquarters as a forward observer. He received no formal training. He learned by doing. By April, he had called 23 fire missions. 17 were confirmed effective. 3 landed outside the target area without causing friendly casualties. 3 were canceled before firing due to shifting front lines. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. Hendricks was in Czechoslovakia when the ceasefire was announced. He had been promoted to corporal. His radio was still the SCR-300 he had carried since February. The antenna was bent. The casing was cracked. It still worked. He returned to the United States in September 1945. He was discharged at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, on October 3rd. He returned to Cedar Rapids. He worked at his father's grain elevator until 1948, then took a job with the Chicago and Northwestern Railway as a freight coordinator. He married in 1950. He had 3 children. He did not talk about the war. In 1962, a historian from the Army War College contacted him while researching artillery coordination during the Rhine campaign. The historian had found the after-action report from March 18, 1945. The report documented the fire mission that destroyed the German assault element near Remagen. It listed Hendricks as the observer. The report noted that he had no formal training. It noted that his adjustments were accurate. It noted that the mission prevented a breakthrough. The historian asked Hendricks if he remembered it. Hendricks said he did. The historian asked how he had known what to do. Hendricks said he had listened to Lieutenant Kemp call fire missions before he died. He said he remembered the procedure. He said he did not think about it at the time. He just did what seemed necessary. James Hendricks died in Cedar Rapids on November 14, 1993. He was 70 years old. His obituary in the Cedar Rapids Gazette mentioned that he was a veteran of World War II. It did not mention Remagen. It did not mention the fire mission. His radio, the SCR-300 he carried in March 1945, was never recovered. It was likely discarded or destroyed after the war. The 4 German prisoners taken from the woods east of the impact zone were processed at a POW camp in France. 3 survived the war. 1 died of his wounds in April 1945. None of them knew who had called the artillery that killed their unit. The guns of Battery A, 7th Field Artillery Battalion, fired 4,216 rounds during the Remagen campaign. 16 of those rounds were fired at 14:27 on March 18th at the request of a radio operator who had never called fire before. The battery was deactivated in 1946. At 14:23 on March 18th, 1945, James Hendricks was a man who could not shoot. By 14:34, 38 men were dead and he had never touched his rifle.